I have a confession to make. I have let you down. I have failed you. And I read your comments, so I know that I have been exposed. And if you've been watching for a while, you know that I have told you from day one that when I'm dead wrong, I will admit to being dead wrong. And frankly, I'm so embarrassed and ashamed of my miscalculations that I'm thinking about leaving YouTube entirely. But before I throw in the towel completely, I think it's important that we go back and review some of what my predictions have been. Because I remember when Michael Burry was considered to be a completely insane lunatic that Wall Street and institutions and investors and the general public refused to listen to. Because some of the trends and some of the patterns that he found through his own due diligence and through his highly qualified analysis made it abundantly clear to everyone who paid attention. And to be clear, that number was small, that there was a massive problem on the horizon. And while most people felt like they were standing on the beach waiting for a wave to crash on them, the wave didn't really look that bad, but they were only focused on the small wave that was definitely going to crash on the shore and crash on them. And what they did not see, but Michael Burry did see, was that about 10, 20, 30 miles past that first initial wave, there was a massive tsunami that was getting ready to completely eviscerate them, the beach, and anything that stood in its way. And if you've been watching for a while, you know that I remain committed to telling you the truth about what's happening right now in my hyperlocal markets and all 22 metros that exist within the state of Florida. And although that data is completely lagging and not up to speed or accurate or actionable if you happen to be shopping in one of those markets, if we look to that data, it will support the position that in the near term, home prices are going significantly higher, despite the fact that mortgage interest rates are skyrocketing, despite the fact that inflation is through the roof, despite the fact that monetary policy is not getting better, it's getting worse, despite the fact that there are many markets that are in extreme risk right now due to all of the other variables that we've talked about in the past. And this video is not going to be a deep dive into what all those things are. It is going to be a deep dive into what my predictions have been for the last year so that we can both determine how wrong I've been and what a fraud I feel like given the circumstances. And that's what the comment section says. Many of you think I am a complete scam artist. Many of you think I am a self-serving dirtbag who is only out to make a buck for himself. And if that's what you believe, please unsubscribe to the channel because this is not the channel for you. And while it's factually true, I am not an analyst. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an economist. But I was a stockbroker for 20 years. And I did execute trades and make profitable trades for my clients during the great financial crisis. And I made more money for my clients and myself in bear markets, in recessions, in crises than I ever have in any bull market since. But past performance does not indicate future returns. So what I did yesterday is irrelevant. What I do today, however, is very valuable. And so we're going to do a deep dive into exactly what I have predicted in the past, and we can reconcile and see how wrong my predictions were. Because if they are as bad as the comment section says, I am deplatforming myself because I am not qualified to talk to anybody about anything. And please do your own research, do your own due diligence. Please check these facts out for yourself because you should not trust me any further than you can throw me. And based on the comments that I get from the tough guys in the comment section, I suspect there's a pretty good amount of you that could probably throw me pretty far. But I don't want anyone to throw out their back. I want you to do your own diligence and empower yourself with the truth. But please keep in mind, I am 1000% committed to sharing the truth about what's actually happening now and the risks I see inherent in the system. And the writing on the wall was very obvious to me once the Fed started their tightening cycle. And so I think it's important before we get into a reconciliation of my predictions, I think it's very critical to understand why I made those predictions, because those predictions have very obvious outcomes to me. And you're welcome to disagree, and you're welcome to leave the channel if you don't like what I have to say. But the numbers don't lie. And if we look at the Fed rate hikes from 2022 to 2023 in an effort to tame inflation, which, by the way, is not working, we can't help but notice the tightening cycle. And on March 17th of 2022, the rate change was 25 basis points, and the federal funds rate went from 0.25% to 0.5%. On May 5th, 2022, it was an increase of 50 basis points from 0.75 to 1%. June 16th, 75 basis points, 1.5 to 1.75 in terms of Fed funds rates. July 27th, 75 basis points. And now I'm not going to read all of the Fed fund rate increases. You can see them in the column on the left. But there is a pattern of tightening. It was very obvious to me what was happening. It was very obvious to me what the outcomes of that tightening policy would look like. And I started talking about it in real time. Now, I know most of you have not watched that content. So today I'm going to review it with you and for you, because I want to see how much of a fraud my predictions actually are versus the reality of what actually happened, because I think it will eliminate a lot of confusion, either for you or for me. And if I'm wrong, I'm deplatforming myself. Nonetheless, 75 points, 75 points, 75 points, 50 basis points, 25 basis points, 25 basis points, and another 25 basis points. The Fed funds rate is now from 5% to 5.25%. And we are in June. And what did the numbers demonstrate? They demonstrated that inflation is continuing to uptick. And Big Papa Powell has told us exactly what he intends to do. So with that in mind, let's get into it. Now, to be abundantly clear, I'm not going to go into a deep dive on each video, but I do want to point out that I noticed that the inflationary environment was changing big time well before the Fed started their tightening policy. And although I had started to talk about these changes previous to this video, this is the first video that I did talking about the obvious changes happening in terms of inflation, in terms of its impact on the consumer. And what you'll notice is that although the Fed tightening cycle started in September, on March 24th of 2022, I made a video that nobody watched called "Are South Florida Gas Prices Insane?" And I talk about the inflationary impact that is causing distress for the consumer. And I had to go into the back end of YouTube to find some of this content because it's old, but I was talking about this over a year ago. It was clear to me what the trajectory of these changes would be in the future. And while I know there were a lot of real estate agents complaining about the fact that gas prices had gone higher, they didn't connect the dots as to what that would mean in the future. And just like Michael Burry, who was thought to be insane up until he was proven right, I suspect if you have the patience to work through these videos with me, what you'll see is an undeniable pattern of predictions that have all come true. But again, I could be wrong. And if I am leaving YouTube because I am the world's biggest idiot, as some of you have pointed out in the comment section. Nonetheless, March 24th, I'm on the record and we're starting to talk about inflation, which takes me to a video I did on May 21st or 22nd, talking about the inflation crisis and Florida home values. And to be clear, Almost nobody watched this video, and that's okay because I'm committed to telling you the truth about what's happening now and what's likely to happen in the future, having traded through the great financial crisis when I was a stockbroker. But the pattern of evidence continues to mount, and the predictions that I make have potentially been proven true. Now, I'm not going to make you watch every video, and this one is damn near an hour. Nobody else watched it either. But I suspect if you did watch it, what you would come to find is everything that I said in that video has actually either happened, has either already happened, is currently happening, or will likely happen in the future. Yet to be determined, I don't know. But so far, my predictions are about 100% accurate, despite what you say in the comments. But to ensure that I was very clear in terms of what was likely to happen, please check out the thumbnail, which is clearly titled, "We're Effed." And if you took the time to read the description, which I doubt anybody did because almost nobody watched the video, what you'll see is I go on the record as stating that rising inflation is making everything more expensive. Mortgage rates, housing market, interest rates, real estate, gas, milk, groceries, everything is more expensive. The cost of goods and services is skyrocketing. And if you think it's bad now, just wait. And I got news for you. If you think it's bad now, a year later, just wait, because you ain't seen nothing yet. Which is exactly what I said a year ago, and you can read it in the description, which is highlighted in blue. How will the inflation crisis impact home values? Is the real estate market going to crash? Are home values going to tank? Is it going to be 2008 all over again? If you're a more recent viewer, you've heard me talk about all those things. And the truth is, the housing market in my market continues to uptick, and the supply of homes for sale continues to uptick. But the new listing supply continues to be in short supply. So the older homes that are overpriced don't sell, but the newer homes, which are very nice, there is a scarcity of them. And when they do hit the market, there is typically tremendous demand for those homes. And I suspect that pattern is going to continue for a while up until personal financial distress upticks in a major way. And if you think it's bad now in terms of personal financial distress, just wait because it's coming. And that's going to get a whole lot worse. Which takes me to June 19th of 2022, where I did a video called "The Fed Just Detonated the Housing Market." And as you can see in the thumbnail, it's no bueno because interest rates were going higher. And I went on to do a deep dive as to what that looked like. The Fed just detonated the housing market by announcing a massive rate increase in order to try and stop inflation. Inflation is out of control. This video is all about the massive rate hike, which will impact homeowners and anybody planning on buying or selling real estate. And then I went on to share exactly what you can do now to get in front of this economic cycle. Now, full disclosure, in many ways, my timing is off. And if you've been watching for a while, you know damn well that I've told everybody I am not a market timer. I will never get the absolute bottom or the absolute top of any market. But what I will do is share the truth. I will share exactly what's happening now in regards to financial markets and the economy based on my experience, not as an analyst, not as a fiduciary, not as an economist, just as someone who has traded through them as a stockbroker for 20 years, because the pattern is very predictable. But I just want to be very clear. I started talking about this before they started raising Fed funds rates. And so you can tell me that I'm a fraud, or you can accept the information, empower yourself with it, and make better decisions based on real actionable information and figure out what's right for you. And to be abundantly clear, I have just set up a Patreon channel, which I will include a link to in this video. And I am going to give you the uncensored truth about everything. So whether you are a real estate professional watching this channel and want to learn how to get more business and how to serve and support your clients at the highest level possible, or you're a real estate investor looking to capitalize on the weakness As personal financial distress increases, if you're looking to capitalize on that weakness, I will share my journey with you as I do it for myself. And then in addition to that, I go off on every other topic that I want to go off about as it really relates to every other topic that I can't talk about here on YouTube because YouTube does not promote free speech. And my Patreon channel will be the absolute uncensored truth. And I hope I entertain and provide a tremendous amount of value because I am committed to doing that on that platform. And to be clear, nothing's going to change here. I will continue to empower and educate and inform so that you can make the best decisions for yourself, for your family, and for your financial bottom line. But I have come to learn I am at far too much risk of being deplatformed if I continue talking the way I've been talking. And to be clear, through this audit that we're doing together right now, if I am in fact wrong, I'm canceling myself. But on June 24th of 2022, I talked about the rate changes that are happening. I talked about home sellers are in for a hard landing. And while that hasn't necessarily played out in my local housing market, it has certainly played out in other markets throughout the country. So although my timing was a little bit off so far, I can assure you at some point I will be right, just like Michael Burry. And to just make sure everybody's on the same page here, when I made the liquidity crisis video, I had already seen the pattern. I had seen the writing on the wall because when I made my video on September 2nd, talking about the liquidity crisis that will destroy the housing market, we had a pattern of massive rate changes, of massive increases to the Fed funds rates. And the tone of Big Papa Powell had changed dramatically. It had gotten very hawkish. And so going into that video, I had already seen increases of 25 basis points, 50 basis points, 75 basis points, 75 basis points. And I was 99.9% certain that come September's FOMC meeting, we would be looking at another 75 basis points. And that's exactly what we saw. So that gives you a little bit of context. We went from damn near 0% Fed funds rates to 3.25 in that window. And with that, my predictions begin. And today we're going to review that video and audit myself. If I fail, I cancel my account. But if I'm right, I hope you'll subscribe. I hope you'll join my Patreon, and I hope we can both profit together. If you're thinking about buying or selling, please reach out because I will negotiate the best deal for you if you're buying, and I will get you the most amount of money if you're thinking about selling. And if you're thinking about investing on my Patreon channel, I will show you how to do that with no credit, no cash, no credentials while you're in financial distress because there are creative solutions which will solve your pain points. But that's on Patreon. I'll hope you join me. So let's get into it right now. Boom, we're live. All right, so today we're going to get right into it. And before we do, I need to share that prior to becoming a real estate professional, in my past life, I was a stockbroker for 18 years. And during the course of my 18-year career as a stockbroker, I experienced market crashes. I experienced global market crashes. I experienced the impact of corporate failure, government failure, currency failure, and devaluation, too big to fail, and every possible economic disaster that could happen globally because I was trading equities on a day-to-day basis for my clients. Does any of that sound familiar? Does any of that sound current? Does any of that sound like what we're experiencing right now and trending further into? Because to me it does. But again, you be the judge. It was a 24-hour-a-day job. I was constantly glued to CNBC. I had to know what was going on in every market everywhere in order to be able to give my clients perspective and the best information so that they could make the best decisions for themselves, for their family, and for their financial bottom line. Now, as much as I hate to interrupt myself and make this long video longer, I feel a fiduciary responsibility with every client that I work with to tell them the truth, to share with them exactly what I see in terms of economic risk, financial risk, mortgage risk, and all of the bad things that could potentially happen. And I don't say that to scare anybody. And I certainly don't say that to talk myself out of getting some business. But I want to ensure that the clients that I'm working with have a full understanding of what the possibilities are. And there are folks that are willing to absorb that risk. And there are folks that are not able to absorb that risk. But what disturbs me is when I meet real estate professionals who are meeting with clients today that don't tell them what any of the risks are. They only tell them that real estate trades in one direction. It's named after a street called One Way. And according to many of these so-called professionals, it only goes higher. And that's not true. And while I'm not a fiduciary for anyone, I take on that personal responsibility. And I also ensure anyone who works with me does the same, because an empowered, educated client is a client for life. And I want to be your real estate professional for life. So despite my best interest, sometimes I ensure you know everything so that you can make the best decision for yourself. And I will absolutely not tolerate sales pressure from anyone on my team. And I certainly won't put any on you. It's against everything I believe in. And I know there's a lot of commenters that don't feel that way. Please do me a favor, go away. The main difference between trading equities and the real estate market is that equities price in change instantly, and the real estate market doesn't. And so while there are all kinds of things that are happening right now in the economy and in the world, they really haven't impacted the real estate market very much, at least not till this point. And when I say that, I got to take a step back. It's absolutely changed the dynamics of the real estate market here in Florida, of the housing market here in Florida, and everywhere else in the country. But up to this point, at least in my market, we haven't seen anything that looks like a price crash. What we've seen is a return to more normalized growth. And I don't expect to see that change until the pain of this recession is felt, until there is a liquidity crisis. But make no mistake, there will be for some people and some markets, and that will happen sooner rather than later, depending on where they're at. Now, let me jump in here. The last crash, because everyone talks about this time is different, you're right. This crash or this correction or this reset or whatever the thing is going to be called will be very different than the last time, because it only took 10% of the overall market sales to be in distress to bring down the national market price by 30%. But as I go on to say, that was the national average. There are other markets that were impacted much more severely. And I don't believe with the amount of equity that people have today that they're going to be distressed sales or forced sales or bank sales the way it was in the past. I don't think that's going to be what happens, but I do think personal financial distress will uptick exponentially. And it doesn't take a bank foreclosing on you to create distress. When you can't make a payment and you can't live your life and you can't afford your lifestyle, you will be forced to have a distressed sale because you're in distress. And although a bank isn't forcing it, the economic impact and the impact to the overall market will be the same. Just to give you some context, the financial crisis of 2007, 2008 was really driven by the subprime mortgage crisis, and it caused a severe contraction of liquidity in global financial markets in the US, and as a result, the housing market. We don't have a subprime mortgage crisis today, but what everybody seems to be oblivious to is that it's not going to be the same thing this time that took us out last time. It's going to be something different. And I want to talk about what some of those things are so that I can prepare you and inform you so that you can make the best decisions for yourself, for your family, and for your financial bottom line. I'm like a broken record, but I'm right. Or maybe I'm not. We'll see. Because if I'm wrong, I'm out of here. I'm canceling my channel. The crisis back in Too Big to Fail, back when everything was roaring and the housing market was taking off, we were on a bull run everywhere and everybody felt wealthy. Everyone felt really good about their financial position. And then on September 25th, Washington Mutual, which at the time, WAMU,
which was the sixth largest financial institution in the United States, it was shut down. And it was shut down because deposit holders withdrew almost $17 billion of money, and the bank no longer had any reserve. As everybody knows, that's not a good thing, right? If the consumer cannot trust our financial institutions, if they don't believe their money is safe, there will be a run on the banks. And if there's a
Run on the bank. Does that sound familiar? Has anybody recently experienced any type of bank failure due to the tightening cycle that Big Papa Powell has instituted? Has there been a mass consolidation within the banking industry to the too big to fail banks? The same banks that are in bed with the government, the same banks that, if they get control of the ledger, can empower the government to create a social credit score. And if that happens, we're looking at the United States of China. Is that possible? Well, I don't know, but I predicted there will be bank failures, and I'm sure I go on to talk about it there, but let's just name a few right now. And to be totally transparent, when I made this video back in 2022, there were no bank failures yet. But in 2023, there were three, as I predicted would happen. And I'm on the record right now as stating that so far there have been three. I suspect we're going to see another 10 either get consolidated, bought out, or completely fail in the near term. And yes, the government will create different programs and packages to try to make it seem like it's not what it is. But the truth is, there have been three epic bank failures caused by the tightening cycle. And we had First Republic in May, which failed. And in March, we had Signature Bank in New York fail. And then, of course, there was Silicon Valley Bank, which also in March failed. And Jamie Dimon is just sitting there waiting in the wings to collect all of these new assets and accounts. And if it's not Jamie Dimon, it'll be someone else similar to Jamie Dimon. But please look at the numbers. These are not small banks. These are not small assets. This is a massive inside job run on the banks.
Run on the banks, then we've got a liquidity crisis of epic proportions, which absolutely is going to impact every sector of every market, period. Now, I am blessed because I receive so many phone calls from people around the country and around the world, people just like you who are watching my content. They reach out, they've got questions. They hire me to help them go out there, find their dream home, find their dream lifestyle, get them the best deal possible, or give them the best advice possible. And I am always committed to doing that. So full disclosure, I am a real estate professional, and I do want to support you in your home buying journey. If the economic conditions and the market conditions and your financial position is not intact and you don't have total clarity around it, then I am most likely going to advise you not to buy a home.
Well, I can't believe what I'm hearing right now.
So part of my process and part of any real estate professional's process should be that they really need to understand, and they really need to lean in to help you understand what the financial implications and risks are depending on what your situation is. And right now in this market, in South Palm Beach County, there are plenty of buyers that are very affluent, that are out there buying homes, and they are thrilled to do so. So not everything I'm about to share is necessarily going to impact everybody the same way, but it is critical to understand what is happening in real time so that you can go out there and position yourself the right way. So here are the things that I see that are happening right now, which tell me that we are primed and ready for a liquidity crisis of epic proportions. And I'm going to start with the auto market. I'm going to start with auto loans. If we look back in history, if we look back in 2007, 2008, and we look at the subprime loans that existed in the housing market and the mortgage market, and anybody out there with a pulse that was willing to state that they made a certain income.
Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think it's important to go back and look at what actually happened in the car repo market and see what those numbers are, because I predicted this about a year ago. Let's see what the numbers yield, because the numbers don't lie. But what you can't help but notice is the car repossession facts from United States data is that 2.2 million vehicles are repossessed every year, and 5,418 repossessions happen every day, which breaks down to 226 car repos every hour or 3.76 repos a minute. And while I'm not going to break down what the models are for each repossession because you can read, the stat that I think is very important to understand, especially as we get into a more inflationary environment, into a more recessionary environment, as unemployment numbers uptick and salaries downtick because people aren't willing to pay the same way they were during the pandemic, yearly repossession rates are at 65% compared to yearly new car sales. That translates into for every 2.4 cars sold, one existing vehicle on the road will be repossessed each year. Well, if these car interest rates are predatory and they are insanely high, what do you think's going to happen when people can't afford to buy things? What do you think's going to happen when they're in financial distress? Are they going to continue to pay for the luxury car that's financed at some insane rate? I suspect not. And you're going to see a major uptick in car repossessions. We've already seen that. I predicted it a year ago. What you haven't seen is the banks actually auction and realize the losses. When they realize those losses and they become real and they hit the balance sheets, if you thought there was a bank run or a banking crisis based on the fact that the Fed had raised interest rates, wait till you see how the capitalization of banks tanked instantly when they realize those losses. And I can promise you, the consumer will not trust the banks at all. And we're already seeing that play out. So I've predicted there will be 10 more banks to fail. It could be significantly worse. And the more that upticks, the more likely we're going to see other markets fail. And to be clear, the reason I'm doing this video is to audit myself from my predictions a year ago. And if I'm wrong, I will cancel my account. But so far, it doesn't seem like I've been wrong about anything. And I suspect when these things actually are realized, I sure hope that the market takes notice and my YouTube channel explodes because just like Michael Burry, I was right. I've got several hundred videos talking about what absolutely is going to happen years in advance of it actually happening. And I don't say that to break my arm to pat myself on the back. I say it because I read your comments. And honestly, I don't know if you people watch the content with the volume off or if you don't watch the content at all, but your comments are completely misguided and completely delusional. And so please, if you're not able to keep up with the level of conversation, please unsubscribe because you're not part of my tribe. And if it does make sense to you and you want to learn how to capitalize on the weakness that will exist in the markets moving forward, and I will show you how I am acquiring assets using creative solutions, using creative financing, and building my own portfolio, then please check out Patreon because I'm going to go off. I go off on everything you could possibly want to know about.
We look back in 2007, 2008, and we look at the subprime loans that existed in the housing market and the mortgage market, and anybody out there with a pulse that was willing to state that they made a certain income could go out there and buy a home, and they could buy way more than they could afford, and they could put almost no money down or no money down. The mortgage fraud was completely out of control, and everybody turned a blind eye to it, and nobody seemed to care.
And one of the things I hear many real estate professionals talk about now as it relates to how today's market is different than way back when is the strength of the borrower, is the strength of the creditworthiness of the borrower, is the fact that the borrower and the creditor has much more skin in the game. And yet, I also predicted that the government would create programs which would make it very easy to create demand. And what have we seen since? Lenders are rolling out 1% down payment mortgages. And lending standards have changed to where if you've got perfect credit these days, you are actually being penalized and subsidizing those who don't have better credit and or bigger deposits. So the system is already playing games to stimulate the market and increase demand, to increase the ability of more buyers to buy more homes, which is exactly what I've predicted in many other videos too. They're playing games artificially, manipulating numbers in order to be able to point to something positive, like increased home values, in order to get the general public to buy into the notion that everybody's wealthy and everything is fine. Well, I got news for you. Not everything is fine. And at some point, there is going to be financial hell to pay. And for those of you out there that think I'm the harvester of sorrows, I'm not. These are all very predictable things that must happen over time. And not because I'm so smart, but because I'm experienced. I've been in markets that go up, down, and sideways. And I've been in economic cycles that go up, down, and sideways. And all of these patterns are predictable. And so far in my internal audit, every single thing that I predicted would happen over a year ago has happened, period. End of story.
I hope I don't forget to talk about the risk that is inherent right now in the homeowner insurance space in Florida. So, mental note to self, don't forget to talk about that, because that is also going to create a liquidity crisis if we get hit by a series of hurricanes, which, by the way, we haven't been hit by a series of hurricanes in almost 10, 15 years. And right now, there are storms that are developing in the Caribbean, which I think we're outside of the forecast, but that forecast can change on a dime. So we're going to get into that, but not right now.
Well, that's not true. We're definitely going to get into it right now. And I've done tons of content in the past talking about the risks inherent within the Florida insurance market. Citizens Property Insurance is not capitalized the right way. They do not have the funds to pay out in the event of a major catastrophe, which means that the rest of the policyholders within the state will have to be assessed in order to make up for any deficiency that may happen in the future. And keep in mind, this video is over a year old. I've done tons of content since then talking about those risks that are inherent in the home insurance market. And I'll link them in this video so that you can watch them. I don't want this to become a 2-hour video, but everything I said so far has come true. So please, in the comments section, either buy in or get the hell out. Because honestly, I'm sick of the negativity. And honestly, I'm sick of the terroristic threats that I'm receiving. And I used to love replying to the comments. It was a lot of fun, but I can't do that anymore. So if you want to comment, then please join me on Twitter where I can actually reply, because I won't be censored. And more importantly, if you want more access, then join me on Patreon, because we can go deep into whatever it is you want to talk about, and we can build a community in which we can have open dialogue. But I can tell you, I am sick and tired of the threatening, abusive comments. And while most of you leave great comments, and I appreciate the fact that you do, there is a subset of people who think it's cool to bring in my family. And I can tell you that's not cool. That is off limits. So please, if that is your inclination, unsubscribe now, because I have a zero tolerance for it.
Let's go a little bit more macro, and let's look at some of the biggest corporations that exist right now today. Let's look at the S&P 500, which are the 500 largest companies in the United States. 20% of the top 500 companies cannot pay their debt. They cannot service the debt that they've incurred, which means they are zombie companies. And if they don't get infused with capital, or they can't raise new rounds of capital, they can't pay payroll. And if a company can't make payroll, that company is out of business. And I watched it happen to Bear Stearns, and I watched it happen to numerous different financial institutions that if the government did not come in and inject them with capital, they would have been gone. Poof, obsolete. But today's government, today's treasury does not have the liquidity. Yes, they could print money, which would then devalue our currency in a way that I don't even want to pretend to think about. But I think it's pretty fair to assume that 20% of the companies that don't have enough money to pay their own debt are likely going to have to lay off massive amounts of people to stay in business. And if people who are out there who are experiencing pain no longer have a job, they will be forced to sell their home. And again, this won't apply to everyone, but if there's a mass exodus of people who want to get out of their home and are mailing their keys back to their lender, I got news for you. Half price homes are back on the table.
Let me just start by saying it's not like I want to be right about these predictions. It's not like I'm rooting for these bad things to happen. It's not like this is what I want. In fact, it's the opposite of what I want. And yet, everything I just said about the big corporations that don't have the ability to service their debt has happened in the commercial real estate space. And half price buildings are currently on the table right now in major cities. And in case you hadn't noticed, there has been mass layoffs throughout many industries over the course of the last year. And I'm not going to go into a big list of what they are, because you can do a quick Google search and see who they are and see how bad they were. And it's primarily the tech space for now, but it's also financial services, and it's also the real estate industry and many other industries too. But there has been a massive uptick in layoffs from a corporate perspective because they must do that. They must cut the pinky to save the arm. They must reduce their payroll in order to stay solvent. And I'm not going to go any further into the video because every single thing, every single prediction I made has come true. And I'm going to go on the record right now and state that every single one of those predictions that I made, which has actually happened, is going to get worse. And woohoo, I survived the audit. But I'm not auditing myself to impress you. I'm auditing myself to impress on you that you don't exactly have to be Nostradamus to figure out what is coming soon. And the wave that people see coming pales in comparison to the economic tsunami, which is just a few miles past that offshore. It's coming. And when it hits, it is going to hit hard. Which does not mean that the government and the United States is going out of business. And it doesn't mean that real estate and financial markets are all going to zero. It doesn't mean any of those things. But it does mean you must be prudent, disciplined, and financially sound in every aspect of your life in order to survive this next cycle and thrive through it. And the unfortunate reality is, anybody who tells you that they know when these things are going to happen is full of baloney, because nobody knows. And there's a heck of a lot more things that can be done to stimulate many different economic levers to continue to kick the can down the road, which, to be abundantly clear, does not mean you should not buy or sell a home if buying or selling a home is right for you. But it does mean you must know what's going on and be fully empowered with the truth in order to make the best decisions for yourself, for your family, and for your financial bottom line. Now, I hope you found this content valuable. And if you did, please subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, follow me on Patreon, where I go off and share exactly how I intend to capitalize on the weakness that exists in the markets, because I'm going to document every single step of the way as I do it for myself. And because there's no censorship there, I can go off about any single topic that I choose to. So I invite you to join me there. I hope you'll join my tribe, because we're going to have a heck of a lot of fun. If you're thinking about buying or selling, please reach out, because we would love to help. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, where I can never be censored, and check out my next video, because I suspect you will love it a lot. And until next time,